Hello and welcome back to a weekly market recap. I'm Knight, flying solo again this week, but looking forward to next week when I have my partner in crime back. So let's get right into the market. This week we saw the market up 1.25%, which brings us year to date up 13.86%. We are up from the highs that we saw in February, 9.55%, and up from the lows that we saw in March, 65.79%. So this week, relatively big week of news, pulling the market in different directions. And on Friday, we finally had the addition of Tesla to the S&P 500, which we've been talking about for a while. And it did affect the close. So let's get into it. On Friday, the last hour of trading was in some ways some of the most volatile we've seen this year. And this has obviously been a crazy volatile year. We saw Amazon, for example, shoot up 5%, shoot down 5%, and then shoot back up 5% in 30 minutes. And one of the main reasons for this is the inclusion and addition of Tesla to the S&P 500 indexes, which is supposed to happen at close. So what happened is, to make room for that trade, we saw a lot of people selling the other companies in the S&P 500. So the other massive ones, Apple, Amazon, all the ones really up at the top of the S&P 500 were selling off. And the surprising part is, as soon as they started to sell off, someone out there saw that as a buying opportunity, bought the low, and to the point where it shot back up. So we saw a very, very fast 5% drop and 5% rise in a lot of the biggest S&P 500 companies. So as we got to close and Tesla's being added, it'll be interesting to see what everything opens at on Monday. Speaking of opening on Monday, the biggest news out of this week and what we want to continue to see is stimulus. So as of talks, Friday end of close, it said we're within a few hours of getting stimulus. Now, if that's true and we get stimulus over the weekend, it's going to be a huge help to the market and the market's going to love it. We've seen pain start to increase on Main Street. And so in some ways, the market is hoping and expecting some level of stimulus to be agreed to. So we'll have to keep an eye on what actually happens this weekend. But if we're not reaching stimulus and if there's still a massive stall, I'm very well expecting the market to be down significantly at open on Monday. And then there might be a rebound depending on what the news is that is coming out. Now, the last thing of big news for this week was the unemployment starts that we saw this week are again above 800,000 for the second week in a row, all the way at 885,000. So why is this significant? One, we're continuing the pattern of getting more and more unemployment starts, which means obviously the economy is doing worse and worse each week. The Main Street economists were also expecting a decrease from last week. So last week we had 860,000 unemployment starts. This week we had 885,000. So it was a little bit worse than last week. And the economists were expecting it to decrease and were expecting numbers around 808,000. So all this is significant to just say that the pain that we're seeing in Main Street, in the hospitality industry, in state and local governments is all really, really important right now and why this stimulus is significant. Now, on the flip side of the negative, some of the positive news that's been surprising is around municipals, so that's local and state governments, and we've been hearing for a long time they need help, they need this stimulus, they need to be included. And while I still believe that to be true and they likely will receive some stimulus in this next round, overall, there's been some really positive news from a lot of these states, at least on the state level. When we get down to specific municipalities in towns, it can get a little dicey comparing each ones. There's some that have done really well and some that have done poorly. But on the state level, relatively positive news across the board with governors saying that their budgets are actually going to be better than were expected. They've been able to receive more revenue from different taxes, whether that's taxing the unemployment and the specific benefits that they've been given, more of that this year. So they had more revenue from that area, whether it's the market doing really well and being able to capitalize on some taxes from that aspect. So overall, surprising news that municipalities are actually doing as well as they are. But when we start to dig into it, it starts to make sense. Now, that being said, still looking in this next round of stimulus to have some level of support for those state and local governments, but maybe it can explain at least a little bit why it's taken so long and why there has been some pushback between both sides, on the Democrats saying this is really, really necessary and the Republicans saying we don't know if this needs to be included. So there's obviously that division that's kept stimulus talks going for the past 3 or 4 months. And now that we're actually starting to see the numbers and having different governors come out, it personally is a little bit better than it initially seemed. Anyways, overall this week, positive news, really hoping and expecting to see stimulus come in over the weekend. If not, we do believe that the market will have a little bit of a pullback. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me this week, and I will see you again next week.